one thing when I kind of talk to, I've got a presentation, but at the same time, if you guys want to stop me or ask any questions or anything, I am always grateful to be stopped. It'll make it more interesting when I don't talk, and you guys do. And also, I'm talking a little bit about messaging for the most part. It stinks being short. But how many people here are involved at all? I don't know what everybody's roles are with the new kind of regional transit authority and everything Detroit. Is anyone here with marketing, with advertising? Okay, I'm going to change the presentation. Oh, you are? Okay. And I noticed that with your biking, you also have a specialized sticker, so I take it you're an avid cyclist as well, so good. Okay, that's great. I'll kind of talk this around, too. A lot of the stuff we're talking about with messaging also applies, though, too, to just how you think about the transit system and how you talk about transit systems. And so if we want to try to change that around a bit and talk on that, we will. So, all right. Let's see. Okay. All right. I'm just going to take this out if that's okay. All right, so I'm with R&R Partners. We are the advertising agency for the Utah Transit Authority. The main transit work that we do comes out of our Salt Lake office, but we also have 8 other offices in the western U.S. Our biggest one's in Vegas. We do the What Happens in Vegas Stays in Vegas spots, and a bunch of other stuff that way. But that's a little about us. As I mentioned, though, we do quite a lot of transit. We've worked with companies pretty much coast to coast, and you'll notice a couple of these are ones that you heard presentations from yesterday. I got in this morning, and Tom was like, talked about that yesterday, talked about that. So cut a lot of stuff out of the presentation here. But if I do start to tread any ground that you guys have already pounded through yesterday, let me know, and I will shut up, and we can do something new. So. We have worked on a bunch of transit referenda here, and we have a pretty good track record. In fact, our first loss ever was in Atlanta. You guys kind of got that story yesterday, I think, what happened in Atlanta. And we have a little asterisk next to that because we were just hired to do creative on that. We didn't do any strategy research or messaging, which is what we normally do. But anyway, for the most part, we've worked with Tom in St. Louis, Honolulu, Charlotte. We'll go through a couple of those. Yeah, we need more light. That would help. No, I'm just kidding. Can everyone see a little bit? Oh, that's awesome. Okay, thank you. That's my fault for picking a bad color palette too, so I do apologize on that. But we have done quite a bit in terms of transit referendum work, and what we've learned is that every referendum is unique. What works here in Detroit is going to be different than what worked in St. Louis and what worked in Salt Lake City. In fact, it was really funny. I was in the Denver airport. I had about a 4-hour layover yesterday, and there were 2 flights leaving right next to each other in the gates, and one was going back to Salt Lake City, and one was going to Detroit, and I was just looking at it, thinking of the different transit systems in both places, and thinking there really is a different mix everywhere that you go. And so it is unique, but there are principles that do work and different things that if you don't do, you can be pretty sure that it's not going to work as well as if you did do those things in terms of messages. And so I just wanted to kind of run through some of those that have worked in the past and some of the things to think about. And the first one, and I think you talked about this yesterday, is to start early. Did you guys kind of go over this for the most part? I remember advice my dad gave me when I was growing up. One of them was that he told me that a tie that matches everything actually matches nothing. I'm not wearing a tie today. That doesn't apply, but it is good advice. And the second thing he told me was the best time to look for a job is when you don't need a job, and that does apply. The best time to win a transit referendum is when you're not in the middle of a transit referendum. If you can get ahead of it early, if you can get people appreciating transit and the value of transit a year or 2 in advance, you can pretty much be ready to win that transit referendum whenever it comes up. And so that's just kind of a different way of thinking as we think about kind of this new regional transit authority here in Detroit. I like to think about transit systems like icebergs, not because of the speed with which they move, but more with how they're built. And the top part is what everybody sees. And those are the trains and the buses that you put out on the roads. It's the people who are riding it. That's the ridership. But underneath, what the icebergs really build on and what transit systems are based on is public support. Pretty much no transit system in the country sustains itself strictly by the number of people who ride it and the fares that they pay. You have that base of taxpayers, and you have those taxes that are going in to fund it. And as you talk about your transit system, a lot of people will put, 95% of their efforts at the tip of the iceberg, when in reality it really helps to balance it out a little bit and also figure out some messages that boost that public support. And everyone's nodding, so you talked about this yesterday, and you know that as well. But that's kind of what I want to talk about today, is how do we balance our communications between ridership and public support so that when those opportunities to grow the system do arise, we're ready to take advantage of them. And the first one is, we always need to answer the question, what's in it for me? The first time in UTA's history, when we passed that referendum, we went out and we talked to people and a lot of taxpayers, and we said, why do you support transit? And a lot of people did. They said, there's a lot of people who rely on it. They can't get to their jobs otherwise, and that's why I support it. And we said, well, what's in it for you? And they said, well, nothing, except for the fact that I know that a lot of other people need it. And that was a problem because eventually you have to have something in it that's for you. Eventually you have to give people ownership who aren't going to ride the system. And so this is the first commercial that, I don't know if you guys have seen this before, that we ever built for the Utah Transit Authority, and it was going into a referendum campaign. But here it is.
I ain't got no cigarettes, I'll do 2 hours to push that through. He and I do not do my king of the road.
So yeah, there's a transit commercial for the non-transit user. And one thing about that last shot where the train was going overhead and the car was going underneath, we did this commercial so many years ago. That was before we could really cut up and do that digitally. So we had to time those two. And the train had to get going like 3 miles out. And so we would call to the train and say, okay, start now. And then that guy would start driving under the bridge. We were there for like 4 hours sucking. One of the most miserable experiences of my life. But anyway, 2 things that worked really well about that spot, if I'm allowed to brag a little bit about work that I worked on, is one, you can see for the transit non-user that it gave them ownership. And this idea of even if you don't ride it, you use it, is something that we've pulled through pretty much all the transit work we've done since that point. The other thing that worked really well on that was kind of getting people to think about the impact of transit in a different way. Nobody here is going to know the distance between Ogden and Provo, but it's about 80 plus miles. And so to get people to think about every day UTA takes enough cars up off the road to fill a 3-lane highway 80 miles, let people think, wow, I really do benefit from this. You know what I mean? It put it in terms that they hadn't thought of it before, and by doing that, it made it more interesting, it made it more real. This is an ad that we did for APTA a few years ago that was talking about the amount of gasoline that people saved by riding transit in, I think this was 2010 or 2009, but it was 1.4 billion gallons, which sounds like a lot, but then when you think that's enough gasoline that if you put it in gas cans that you could put a stack to the moon and a little bit past, that makes you think, wow, the 1.4 billion is quite a lot of gas. And so anytime, this is something, again, whether you're in a transit campaign or whether you're doing anything else, if you can take numbers and make them more real by visualizing them or putting them in a way that people don't think about normally, it'll have a greiter impact. 1.4 billion sounds like a lot, but stacking gas cans to the moon for some reason is slightly more interesting. I'm not sure, but that's just something to think about as you move forward and kind of letting people know what's in it for me. In the case of St. Louis, which you heard about yesterday if you were here, it wasn't the idea that traffic's bad, that we need to get cars off the roads, and it sounds like here in Detroit that's also the case, that you don't have a ton of congestion. But it's the idea that a lot of people who rely on transit, who you rely on, also rely on transit. And I think that might be another message that would play well here too. But think about how the non-rider really benefits from transit and work that into communication as much as you can. The next one is A transit company always has to have a vision. There always has to be a plan. You always have to be working towards something. And if you can get people to buy into that vision, I keep touching my phone here because I'm trying to make sure I don't go over time. So it's only 6 minutes, though. It probably seems longer, but it's only been 6 minutes. Anyway. Okay, all right, sounds good. So what's the plan? And if you can get people to know what the plan is, this is, we're currently working with Kansas City, with Tom as well, kind of getting people to buy into the idea of what's the vision. And so this is one of the spots that we did there, but we have people standing in front of places where the new rail lines might go, holding a card that shows what the future might look like in that same location, if that makes sense, if we get the support for transit. So.
Imagine taking a train to the game.
Or riding streetcars around town.
Imagine bike paths all over Jackson County.
And better bus routes.
Throughout the area. Imagine a quick commute from Independence to downtown.
Just imagine what it would do for our students, our lives,
Our economy.
Imagine the possibilities at transitworksforus.org.
So again, it's a way to kind of get people to find that vision, to know that you have a plan. It doesn't have to be done in TV. This was an ad that we did years ago for the Utah Transit Authority. Sitting down with this message now may save you from sitting in traffic later. The entire plan was spelled out in 10 paragraphs here. But it really gave people that vision. It let people know exactly what UTA was thinking. In Hawaii, where they were trying to build elevated rail, the idea of right above it all, giving people a map. Sure. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
So, I don't know how much money we have to raise to get you to do one of those for us.
You can, you've got me here. Yeah. This one or the one before it?
The one where the people are holding.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah, no, yeah, and if there's any way we can help, like I said, we really enjoy working on it. And these were all referendum ones, but even just during your day-to-day advertising. Oh, sorry? That's true, transit education, leading up to a possible referendum. But even if you're just talking about, it's that ridership, the tip of the iceberg, not the public support side, you can still give a little bit of that vision. Here's a couple spots that we're currently running with UTA. And the idea we wanted to get across is just this idea of a system that works together all the different modes of travel, be it heavy rail, light rail, or buses. And for all the females in here, you will like the talent on the next one. He was ridiculously good looking. I felt inadequate for about 3 straight days working with. Actually, I'm going to tell a little aside. I'm sorry on this. So I'm talking to this guy, and he's an African drum teacher up at the University of Utah. And he's like, it's strange. All the other classes have 20-year-old students, and mine is all full of middle-aged housewives. And I'm like, go figure. And genuinely, he was clueless. He had no idea why. And I'm like, what would it be like to be you? Anyway, so this is.
I grab the bus to my morning workout. I ride front runner to do my rounds. And I take tracks when I need some space. I've got a system. It's UTA.
So you kind of get that system message. Here's one just because it's the second one, an equal opportunity, but the female spot.
I have a system. I take front runner to the morning meeting. I ride the bus to my downward dog. And I take tracks for a grand finale. Yeah, I have a system. It's UTA.
So again, that's not a support us with money. It's just the regular ridership message. But you do get the idea that UTA has a vision for where the system wants to go and what they want to put together. And so we do that a lot. The second thing that you need, or I guess it's the third thing, that you need to do is make sure that people trust you. And trust is a difficult thing to maintain. because it's affected by everything. For example, with the regional authority here in Detroit, just all the news stories I've been reading over the past couple of weeks about kind of the infighting with the finances between the suburbs and the city and everything that way. Even something like that can let people think, boy, do these guys really have their act together already? And so it's tough to make sure that you maintain those levels of trust. But the more that you can get people to just kind of feel that you are using funds correctly, really establishes a lot of that. And I'll kind of show you the difference between when we're going into a referendum, how we do a general campaign, and if we're just in the middle. Anyway, I'll explain a little better. These are two launch spots for the same front-runner line. The first one opened the north part of the line in a year where we weren't going to go for a referendum for at least another couple of years. The second one launched last year, and UTA is looking at possibly going for another referendum next year in 2014, and that no one's supposed to know that, so don't put that in the notes or on Facebook or anything there, because if that gets back, I'm actually in trouble. You can see the difference. Actually, I shouldn't have said that at all, but it's not going to make any sense if you see these spots and I don't. So anyway, this is the first one where we're talking about front runner, and this is strictly benefit based in a year where we're not going after a referendum. Just how much faster high-speed rail is. Apologize for the volume. Okay. Sure.
That's why I said bank. You don't have to keep bank. UTA Article 26. Catch it if you can.
Story behind that one, this opened in the middle of winter, and so we couldn't get this. Everything was running through the snow and all that, so we had to shoot it in California. So anyway, that was a long story. But anyway, so we shot the train in Utah, then had to impose it in California. But the idea there is that it's going to be faster, and it's more about speed, more about the benefits this way. However, this is for the launch that we just barely did a few months ago. But knowing we're going to go after a referendum, it's got a little more about UTA and about taking something from a plan to fruition, and it's got a little different tone. So.
Imagine the future, or write it December 10th.
And then the radio that went along with that was even less subtle. We basically went around how we just identified all the champions with Tom here who we might be able to use in Detroit. We contacted a bunch of them and said, hey, for the radio spots, could you kind of put together some messages about the impact that Front Runner will have on the communities, but then talk about also how it was delivered on time and under budget and everything that way. So.
Hi, I'm Lane Beatty, president of the Salt Lake Chamber. As you might know, the new UTA Frontrunner commuter rail line from Salt Lake to Provo recently opened for service, and I couldn't be more excited. Back in 2006, I was a member of the 2015 Transportation Alliance, a group of citizens and business leaders committed to improving Utah's mobility and economy by completing 5 new rail projects by 2015 that were scheduled to open in 2030. The UTA Frontrunner South Line is now here years ahead of schedule and under budget. An amazing achievement, and things will only get better this year when the airport and Draper Tracks lines open. It's no wonder that U.S. News and World Report ranks Salt Lake's transit system as among the top 10 in America, in the same breath as New York and Los Angeles, and ahead of cities like Chicago, Seattle, and Atlanta. If you haven't ridden UTA in a while, join me and try it out. You'll be pleasantly surprised. For routes and schedules, visit rideuta.com.
And you'll notice on that one that it didn't sound like it was a spot that was coming from the Utah Transit Authority, although UTA was paying for it. And we'll talk about this in a bit, but people hate it when you spend tax dollars to tell them how great you are. And so if you are going to use people, you're going to put that message out there, try to make it subtle, try to let the other people take ownership of it as much as possible, and we'll talk about that a bit more too. Any questions before we keep going? Okay. Why is your hair so nice, Kyle? I use Axe product. I'm kidding. It's not. Okay. Why should I care is another question that you absolutely need to answer. And we talked a lot yesterday, I understand, about dividing up your constituents and hitting different people with different messages. Is that correct? Okay. The other one that's really important, too, is to answer the question, why now? Because a lot of times people will say, yes, 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 I understand transit's important, but we need to pay for education now, or I'm tired of paying higher taxes now, or whatever now. And so it's always important to answer that question of why now? And here's one more radio example where we did it for a referendum, and then I'll show you a billboard example too.
So, Doctor, how does it look?
Well, let me check your charts here. Well, it looks like your major arteries are all clogged, restricting flow and causing you daily pain.
Yeah, so what should I do?
Give it some time.
Really? Will that help?
Nah, it'll probably just get worse. Pretty soon you won't be able to move, and then the pain will be unbearable.
Oh, well, won't it be harder to fix then?
Absolutely, and a lot more expensive.
Utah's transportation system isn't well. The state's growing population will triple traffic congestion over the next 25 years, and our current roads and highways can't keep up. Waiting to act until we're completely gridlocked is not the answer. By building more tracks, lines, roads, and commuter rail now, we'll save hundreds of millions in construction costs and years of traffic-related pain. Let's keep Utah moving. Vote for Proposition 3.
Paid for by the Salt Lake Chamber.
All right, so that's an example of how to do it on radio. In Charlotte, this was kind of nice. Did you guys talk at all about Charlotte yesterday? Okay, kind of a different referendum in that people were so fed up with cost overruns on the light rail line and political scandal that they actually got a referendum on the ballot to repeal the funding for the rail line and everything that way. So it was kind of the opposite. But on this one, we didn't have a lot of money, and so we called the media company, the billboard company, and said, do you have a billboard that's really next to one of the worst traffic bottlenecks anywhere in the city? We're just going to buy one billboard. And they said, yeah, there's one really big bottleneck here. And we said, okay, we want that one. And so we put this up, and then we changed the creative about every week and a half. So the first week it said, on the bright side, if the transit tax repealed, you guys can all read, you'll have more time to read wordy billboards. And then a week and a half, we added another line with longer messages that ramble on, and while you sit in traffic with nothing better to do. So it really got that message across of what the benefit is and why we needed to take advantage of it now. And it was really simple and fairly cost-effective, but it was one of those things that got people to talk about it, got a couple media stories in the newspaper just because it was interesting. But it answers that question of why now, why should I care? We just spent a lot of time doing this. Who supports this? It's very important to have other people tell your story for you, and ideally people who aren't involved. Anybody who has dated or is currently dating remembered that if your friend talks about how awesome you are, it's much more impressive than if you talk about how awesome you are. And it's the exact same thing when it comes to transit. Last year, U.S. News and World Report ranked UTA #2, the second best transit system in America. We figured we have to get the word out, but we absolutely did not want to have UTA go out and say, look how awesome we are. We were ranked #2. So we contacted the Salt Lake Chamber, and the Salt Lake Chamber ran these ads, not talking about UTA being ranked #2, but about Salt Lake being ranked #2. And then we just used enough of the UTA vehicles on there that everybody still knew who got the credit for it, but it avoided all of those problems. And so, you know, when things go well in Detroit here and you want to talk about it, see if you can have other people talk about it for you, and even better, see if you can have them spend their own money to talk about it. That's a nice way to do it. And just another kind of spot that does the same thing here. We'll kind of run this one. I hope you didn't see this. Oh, you know what? I know you didn't see this one yesterday because I just replaced the St. Louis spot that you did see yesterday. But the story behind this one is this was about a year and a half before we were going after a transit referendum. And so we contacted business leaders in Utah and said, would you talk about the impact that transit has? And what was so fun about this is we were only planning 3 spots, But when all the business leaders heard about, oh, the president of the bank's talking about it, then the president of the credit union wanted to talk about it. And oh, this university president's talking about it. So anyway, we ended up doing about 7 spots just because of ego. But we got them all done. And then when we actually went after the referendum, we just went back to all these people and said, hey, remember how much you said you like transit? Well, we need money to support it. And it was awesome because we got it. So, but this is the one that shows the president of the largest Utah bank, Zions Bank, and then Larry H. Miller, who owns the Utah Jazz and most of the pro sports teams in Salt Lake, who made his fortune in the automobile. He was a car dealer. And so that gives a little, he's dead now. He died about a year and a half ago, and his son Greg took over. But great guy, and that was this spot here.
Never underestimate the impact of transportation on the economy.
In sports, you don't bring in money if you don't bring in people.
If customers and goods can't move, business simply doesn't happen.
Can you imagine downtown Salt Lake City without tracks? Much better like this.
Public transportation has a positive impact on businesses and property values.
Honestly, having UTA has been wonderful. And that's coming from a car guy. UTA, even if you don't ride it, you use it.
Anyway, so that's getting other people to talk about you is a great way to do it. It's also important to know who's against you, and if possible, to preempt their arguments as soon as possible. In the case of Charlotte again, the general perception was that it was just a boondoggle, that it was a mess, and that everybody was against the transit system and how it was being run. And so we said, how can we get in front of this? How can we show people that everybody doesn't actually hate transit? And in this case, we took 2 political opponents, 2 mayors who hated each other, and got them to get together to do a spot to talk about how it actually worked. But you can preempt any argument. I mean, if you know that, Detroit, if you've got, people are talking about there's other priorities for money, you just figure out what those are and then try to get someone who's credible to talk about why they're wrong. So.
Richard,
Harvey, we need to talk. Transit tax repeal.
you've got my attention.
It'll hurt our ability to set Charlotte back for years.
And millions of federal dollars will go elsewhere.
Against transit repeal?
Against repeal.
Vote against repeal of the transit tax. Let's keep Mecklenburg moving.
Richard.
Yeah.
We never talk.
Gotcha.
Anyway, but you can get in front of it, and you can stop people's arguments before they ever get a chance to start, which is nice. Where can I learn more? People now don't just see an ad on TV or read an ad in the newspaper. They always go on to social media. They start to talk about it. You guys all know with writers, if a bus is late or something, you start to see the tweets pop up and everything that way. Writing transit's a social experience, and people who do it tend to be involved in social media a lot. In the case of St. Louis, one of the main keys of success, and I think Tom talked about this yesterday, was the student organization. These are the students from Washington University and other universities, and they were basically the social media team who answered every post, who, when people said bad stuff on news stories, she was the... what was it? Miss Metrolink. And this is the moment that we found out that we had won. But it was exciting, and you see, what just a small group of people engaged in social media can really do. And it's important that you have that in place. And then also you can run entire campaigns in social media. One of our clients, Valley Metro, a couple of years back, because of budget cuts and sales tax problems, had to cut about 30% of their service, and they were getting beat up in the media like crazy about it. And so they said, well, we can't let our ridership drop. The service is gone, but we have to keep the same number of riders, and in fact, it'd be nice if we could grow ridership. And we said, okay, that's a challenge. And they said, and plus, since we don't have money to run service, we don't have any money to do advertising, but we need a really good campaign, which also was a challenge. So we looked and said, if this is going to primarily have to be social media, how are we going to do it? And there's a lot of local bands in Phoenix, kind of like in Detroit here too, and they all had really good social media followings. And on the research, we found the main barrier to ridership is people said, I just don't know how. And so we basically did Schoolhouse Rock. Does anyone know that? Is anyone as old as I am? Okay, if you remember at Schoolhouse Rock, we had local bands, and we said, okay, for how to ride the bus, here's 4 points we want you to make. Write the best song you can think of, and for anybody whose song we really like, we'll put you in an animated video, which is why the people on this next video you're going to like is, are all transit riders in, Phoenix that shaggy? No, it's just the band, what Laura says. But we actually put the band in the video, and we did a whole series of about 8 of them. And, well, I'll talk about the results after, but they turned out really fun, so. But anyway, we did videos for everything on how to put your bike on the bus and how to use the transit book and courtesy on transit. And what we found is hits to their website went up 30%, over 2.5 million. And calls to their call center went down about how to ride the bus. It was great. And overall, ridership increased 5.1% that year, which was astounding. I think nationally that year it increased about 1.7%. So 3 times the national average without enough money to run a real campaign, based just pretty much on social media. It was great. We also did put up, like in colleges and stuff, we made band posters and put those up, and there was some PR and everything. But you can run a good campaign without a lot of money and get a lot of those benefits.
How expensive is it to get this on regular local commercial TV stations or public TV stations? When you do you've done these 10 times, how often are you able to have enough money to buy airtime?
It depends a lot on the media market. Phoenix is a top 20 media market, so it's quite expensive. I imagine Detroit, with the number of people here, it's got to be a pretty expensive market too. Salt Lake's not too bad, for example. Kansas City's not too bad. And so you can do it for less money in smaller markets. Phoenix was impossible. But what we could do is we could put it online, and then we could also put it like in a movie theater or two, something like that, to kind of tease the idea that you can watch more videos online. And then again, letting the bands just talk about it. In fact, one of the bands called us up and they're like, we're playing a show. Do you care if we play your jingle? And we're like, no, please. That would be lovely. We did, yeah. We actually paid a lot of bands at the beginning. We kind of put out a casting call to everybody, and we said, we'll give you $100, $200 for your first demo, and then if we like your song, we'll give you $1,000, which wasn't a lot for a lot of the bands, to record it. But then there was a recording studio in Phoenix called the Salt Mine, which is where like the Jonas Brothers and other big bands have recorded there. But we said, we'll get you into studio with the Salt Mine and let you record there and everything. And we did kind of a little VH1 behind the scenes with each of the bands as they were doing it. We posted that online. So for these up-and-coming bands, it was a nice opportunity. They were really excited about it. A lot of them also rode transit because they were bands and didn't have money for cars. So, I mean, they were very familiar with it. Oh, are you watching them right now? Oh, yeah, they're fun. Anyway, so, but they got a lot of play, and Valley Metro's Facebook friends, or whatever you call them there, it is friends, went up like 700%. They didn't have a lot before, but it was nice. So you can do stuff like that, and it does work well. The other thing that's really important, and I just hit 30 minutes, so I'll kind of be quick on this, is be able to figure out what 1 or 2 things you stand for as a transit system. And one of the best examples of that, love him or hate him, that first go-round, this was brilliant. I mean, an entire election campaign came down to one word, and it summed it up completely. Everybody knew what Obama stood for. and it just caught fire. Likewise with the Utah Transit Authority, not nearly as brilliant as this campaign was, but we really boiled down all of the messages to just a few points. That tip of the iceberg, the ridership point, is always about reliability and speed. We know that when we're putting together a message or we're talking about what UTA is doing, we try to have it revolve around one of those 2 points. And as far as the bottom point of the iceberg, the public support, it tends to be about either future focus, UTA is planning ahead for the future, and fiduciary responsibility, we use money wisely. And if you can keep that focus when the regional transit system comes together, you'll be amazed at how much more powerful it makes your communication. Yeah, me too. I had to look it up. Right. And that's the point is you never actually use these words, but so you're never going to go, we're so fiduciarily responsible. People are going to be like, you're an idiot. But we are impressed by your vocabulary. No, but it's just kind of inside, internally in the agency. Know that these are your points, but when you talk to people like they talk. Otherwise, yeah, you won't earn any brownie points there. But that's just kind of having those bullet points and kind of figuring out what you stand for, make all the difference. And like I said, one of our biggest accounts is Las Vegas. What happens here stays here. And that came out of planning where we found out that Vegas means different things to different people. Everybody has their idea of what the perfect Vegas vacation is. So we wanted to have a position that let people know that they were free to do. Basically, it's adult freedom. But at the same time, we don't want to explain what adult freedom is to different people because everybody wants their freedom in a different way. And so these kind of leave the stories open. People can have the experience they want. But I'll show you 2 of the very first year spots that we did, and then one recent one. You've seen those, but you'll see that in a period of over a decade, it really hasn't changed. It's still all about adult freedom. So here's one of the first ones.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Sydney. Hi. Hi, I'm Jan. I'm Marsha. I'm Rachel. Hi, I'm Monica. I'm Phoebe.
Hi, Phoebe.
I'm Carrie. Charlotte. Miranda. I'm Samantha. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Zena.
Zena?
Yes, Zena. I'm Lucy. This is my friend Ethel. Hi, my name's Louise. Call me Lucy. Hi, I'm Ginger.
Ginger, I'm Cliff, and this is my buddy Norm. Hey.
And then one of the more current ones, and still kind of the same theme.
Yeah, if I only had one statue. I'll have that one. Lightly seared. Garçon. I think I'm gonna get this one.
I don't think this is for sale.
What?
It's a little cold.
No, it's fine. My turn. Yeah.
But you can see, I mean, that whole be whoever you want to be hasn't changed at all. And then just kind of leave one last one here of the originals.
Hey, honey.
Hey! So, what have you been up to?
Nothing. What have you guys been up to?
Nothing.
So anyway, if you can get that single point, yes.
I guess my question is, how do you figure out how do you figure out the couple of messages that would be the most resonant? I mean, obviously that's a much bigger question.
Mm-hmm.
Tips you can offer on that would be great.
Yeah, where I like to start a lot of times, if you can do focus groups or you can just go out and talk to people, ride the system. When we first got the UTA account, we told everyone in the ad agency, you no longer have a car for the next 2 months, and you figure out the system, you ride the system. And so we all went out there, we all rode with everyone, we talked. Don't tell people you're with the system unless you really want a lot of conversation all the way throughout. But just go out, experience it with people, talk with people. We did focus groups, and then once we had the ideas of what we thought they might be with reliability and speed and stuff, then we would do telephone surveys a lot of times to figure out, are we on the right track? And some of it, we didn't get the UTA position. It took about 1.5 years, 2 years before we finally boiled them all down and said, this is really what we're about, and we got everyone to buy in on it. Las Vegas also took kind of years of just planning, but once you find the truth, the nice thing about when you hit on a truth is it becomes obvious. You're like, oh, it just seems to resonate with everybody, and then just ride it for a little while and see if it feels right. So, and that's it. I think I went 33 minutes. I'm sorry about that. So, okay. Thanks.
Hi, I'm with CFTE, and we obviously, as we go around the country talking about campaigns, we talk a lot about many of the specific ads as well as the campaigns that you run. An issue that often gets raised is inside the agency, particularly UTA. Here's a transit agency that has clearly made a long-term investment in sort of reputation management in the community. So their ads aren't, as you pointed out, they're not always specifically directed at a referendum. I mean, maybe in the future, but they're out messaging on a consistent basis.
Right.
That's somewhat unusual, probably for cost reasons for agencies around the country. What's the decision making like internally in that organization that led them to that kind of commitment over the long haul to being a regular sort of messaging presence in the community?
The best thing on that, and they actually experimented some years without running TV spots and running TV spots, they found that it has about a 3 to 5% direct impact on ridership, and so being able to tie it back to the number of people who use the system justifies the cost, because 3 to 5% in ridership clearly outweighs the amount of money they spend on advertising. And then because Salt Lake's a smaller media market, it's not quite as expensive. But the other reason, and this is why I would say even if you're not spending money on paid media, do it on social media and everything that way, is that everybody has a brand. Everybody, it's just like a reputation, and either you can actively manage that reputation or you can let somebody else manage the reputation for you. And as everybody knows here, letting the media manage your reputation, this is only my second time in Detroit and the first time in the city. It's much nicer than I would have believed the media let me know it was going to be living in Utah. And being able to manage that reputation and let people know what you stand for coming directly from you is important, because the media isn't normally your friend. So,
any other questions? Well, thank you very. Oh, yeah, one more.
So as you noted, I guess where we are is there's a possibility of a referendum late next year, but we don't. Certainly the Transit Authority is not ready to run any major marketing, or and the agency, the bus agencies aren't. I guess any suggestions you have for what community coalition type folks can do? Again, I guess it's that whole idea of how do you build support for the idea of transit well before you're actually saying vote yes. Any particular tips for that?
Yeah, and I'm not extremely versed yet on the market here, but I did do quite a bit of reading before. Yeah, I think you guys are in an awesome position, frankly, because you've got this new regional transit authority who everybody seems to be behind, and it's a great chance where we talk about putting out a plan and putting out a vision for the regional transit authority to say, here's where Detroit's going, and then you've got a city that's on its way back and who wants to kind of believe in what's new and what's coming up. And honestly, I think transit is a major part of that. And in terms of just being able to create a vision that people buy into and that people get excited about, because you're starting this new regional transit authority, there's a fantastic opportunity to do that. And so that's kind of where I would start, is just have that vision, have that excitement, and on stuff like where you're fighting about the suburbs and the city, if those types of stories are running, put another story out there to kind of counteract it as much as possible. It doesn't have to be an ad campaign, but just anything else that's good. I know with, I'll try to get my good side. I actually don't have one. But we did like a stuff a bus campaign in UTA for a while there when we were getting hit with a lot of bad press, where it was just we took a lot of buses that weren't in service and we said, hey, if we can fill these completely with food, we'll have a free ridership day the next day or something like that. Or even if you don't do the free one that way, it's just, hey, we're trying to help out. We have a couple buses that aren't in service. I mean, do something that's good that way just to stay in the news and counteract any bad PR. And just some nice active reputation management. But there's a fantastic chance to kind of paint a new vision for transit in Detroit.
Okay, we have one more question over here.
I was just wondering, in terms of your messaging by area, like, do you have any reflections or thoughts about where if it's a city, if it's more of like a small town, like how do you kind of center your message based on where you're like focusing on? And I know you said like you do surveying and stuff like that, but like what have you seen that's different or?
Are you kind of talking just generally, or like where we place the ads in the cities, or I'm sorry, like where we place it and everything that way?
Just your messaging, like how you. Is there anything that you do that's different depending on what type of area you're in?
Yeah, we try ideally to have everyone be different. I mean, there's certainly some commonalities between all the different ad campaigns. I mean, in terms of getting out the plan and getting people to trust you, and if you're going to brag, have other people brag for you. But you're going to have very different, like for example, we talked about freeway congestion as we were driving in this morning. Detroit doesn't have a lot of it, apparently, which is nice. One of the byproducts of not having as many people in the city. There's lots of roads, and so a freeway congestion message here, where that was extremely important in Charlotte and Salt Lake, is going to fall flat. So I'd paint a different vision here, whether it means, like in Hawaii, the system there, we tried to do, traffic there is horrible, but what we found out more than anything else is the message that resonated was jobs. They needed jobs at the time, and once all the unions got on board and said, you know what, this isn't about alleviating traffic, this is about getting enough jobs here for the next 3 years, we had a winner and it passed. So yeah, it changes based on every community. There's going to be more important things to the community, and the messaging has to reflect that.
Okay, we have time for one last question, and then I'm going to let you guys take a really quick break because they're about to break down the coffee and snacks out there, and I'm sure you need a bathroom break.
How you doing, sir? Good morning.
Doing well. You look a lot like Ice-T. You've probably heard that before. So.
No, I really haven't.
Oh, okay.
I wish I had his money, though. I just graduated from the university and working with Mr. Jason here to set this up. But as I was listening to you talk, I had a question that came to mind, and that is, who pays for this? How would that be implemented?
It depends. Generally, when it comes to a referendum campaign, transit agencies themselves can't pay for it. You can't use taxpayer money to try to get more taxpayer money. And so a lot of those are just all these community partnerships that we just talked about. You'll go to your businesses who are going to benefit, and you'll go to your schools, and you'll go to these different places and say, hey, you know, we've got this campaign. We'd really like you to buy into it. And even just, you know, small amounts of money from a bunch of different people add up really quick. So generally, it's the business community who's getting together and supporting something like this.
Right, because my concern was, would it be higher taxes in the community based on building this?
Yeah, no, that makes people furious. But that's what I was saying is if you can get ahead of it, you know it's a couple years, then you can do subtle things to your advertising, like with the UTA launch spots where it's like, oh, look at these guys executing the plan. It still builds ridership, but at the same time it kind of starts to plant those seeds and soften the ground for when you do get the business community to come on board. You've already done a little bit of that initial legwork. So,
thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, well, thank you very much, Kyle. And I think Kyle would be a great resource for this group for some of those questions like Megan was asking about. And I will.
One more thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are an ad agency, but I'll leave a couple of cards. We're also very happy just if you want to just talk, we're not going to charge you for it. We do believe a lot in transit. And so if there are questions you don't get answered, you just want some advice, I'll leave my business card. You can call me directly. I'm happy to answer any questions that way. So.
That is extraordinarily generous and will probably be really helpful.